What if I told you that the United States spent um, over $285 billion last year just to definitively win the global AI race, only to end up in a statistical tie with a country that spent a tiny fraction of that?
I mean, it sounds like a bad joke, right? Or at least, well, a colossal misallocation of funds.
Yeah.
But it is the stark reality of the technological landscape we are standing in right now.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to this special edition of Digi-Tech Debates, which is a segment of Project Plain Talk. I am thrilled you're here listening.
We are very glad to have you with us.
Today's deep dive is designed specifically for you. We know you are the learner, and you want to cut through the noise, you want the facts, and, you really want to understand the mechanics of what is actually happening behind the headlines.
Right.
So your mission today is to make sense of a shift that is rapidly approaching our doorsteps, whether we are ready for it or not. The age of AI governance.
And it is a critical mission because right now, the momentum of this technology is vastly outpacing our ability to control it. The stakes have frankly never been higher for businesses or governments or even just everyday people.
Yeah, absolutely. So to help us navigate this, we have two incredibly revealing stacks of sources on the table today. On one side, we have the massive, highly anticipated 2026 AI Index report from Stanford University.
That thing is a monster of a report.
Oh, it's huge. We've got the 500-page report itself, plus all the newsletters and analytical articles covering it. This thing is a heavy, numbers-packed snapshot of AI's explosive and, well, somewhat chaotic global growth.
And then on the other side of the table, we have the practical antidote to all that chaos. We were looking at a highly structured framework from an Icicle webinar titled Connecting the Dots.
Right. Mathias Vercauteren.
Yes, he's an international data and AI governance expert.
So to set the stage for our listener, how do these two completely different sources actually connect?
Well, if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, the Stanford report is really showing us the why. It illustrates, in frankly terrifying detail, why AI is this high-stakes, rapidly scaling asset.
Disrupting geopolitics, the environment, everything.
Exactly. The wild energy of the AI boom. But Vercauteren's webinar provides the how. It is the essential governance blueprint required to actually manage this incredible asset before it spirals completely out of control.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I want to start directly with the global sprint captured in the Stanford AI Index, because the geopolitical data they gathered is just mind-blowing.
It really is. Let me throw some of the most surprising numbers at you.
Go for it.
So if we look at raw model performance and investment, the long-standing gap between the U.S. and China has completely evaporated.
Wow, completely.
Yes. As of early 2025, China's DeepSeek R1 model matched the absolute top U.S. models. And by March 2026, the latest benchmark data shows Anthropic's top model holds a razor-thin 2.7% lead.
2.7%.
Right, which in the realm of machine learning is basically a statistical tie. They're trading the lead back and forth by the week.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because I want to talk about the investment contrast. The U.S. absolutely dominates private AI investment.
Completely, yes. In 2025, the U.S. saw $285.9 billion in private AI funding. That money fueled nearly 2,000 newly funded AI companies.
In China.
China, by comparison, saw just $12.4 billion in private investment.
So the U.S. is spending more than 23 times what China is spending, a 23-to-1 financial advantage. How does this statistical tie make any logical sense there? I mean, what is that $285 billion actually buying, if not an insurmountable lead?
Well, that is the multi-billion-dollar question. And the Stanford report sheds light on it. Money doesn't buy a monopoly on innovation anymore.
Clearly not.
Right. Well, the U.S. is pouring cash into infrastructure and mega models. China leads the world in AI publication volume, citations, overall patent output, and industrial robot installations. And just to throw another global player into the mix, South Korea is leading the world in innovation density, meaning they have the highest number of AI patents per capita.
It's like two marathon runners crossing the finish line at the exact same time, but one runner spent 23 times more money on their shoes.
That is a perfect way to look at it, yeah. The raw capability and the mountains of cash are just no longer the only differentiators in this race.
Because the secrets are out, right?
Exactly. When researchers publish their findings, or open source communities reverse engineer top-tier models, the foundational math is laid bare. You don't need $100 billion to reinvent the wheel. You just need enough smart people to optimize the wheel that's already rolling.
Which brings up another crazy stat from the report. The brain drain toward the U.S. has almost stopped. The number of AI researchers and developers moving to the U.S. has dropped by 89% since 2017.
Yeah, with an 80% decline just in the last year alone.
That's wild. So if the U.S. is throwing hundreds of billions at this, why is the performance gap shrinking instead of widening? And what does it mean that AI researchers moving to the U.S. have dropped 89%?
It means talent is staying home, or they're going elsewhere.
Yeah.
Raw capability and money are just no longer the only differentiators. The competitive pressure is shifting
Shifting to where?
to real-world deployment, taking it out of the lab and actually putting it into businesses. But as this technology hits the real world, the friction is becoming severe.
Yeah, let's explore what that friction actually looks like on the ground, starting with adoption versus labor, because the Stanford report notes that generative AI hit 53% adoption across organizations in just 3 years.
Which is staggering.
It is. That is faster than the adoption rate of the personal computer, faster than the smartphone, faster than the internet itself.
And geographically, the leaders might surprise you. Singapore is leading global adoption at 61%. Followed closely by the UAE at 54%.
And where is the U.S. in all that?
The U.S., despite all that domestic investment, sits way down at 24th in organizational adoption, covering around just 28%.
So the U.S. builds it, but places like Singapore are actually using it.
Right.
But, this breakneck adoption has a dark side. If you're listening to this and you're, say, a 24-year-old software developer, these next numbers from Stanford are going to sound like a warning siren. We are seeing a massive phenomenon that we could call the junior dev squeeze.
The labor data here is incredibly sobering. In software development, which is basically the ultimate testing ground for AI's impact, productivity is objectively up.
Right, the AI coding assistants.
Yeah. Studies show gains of 14 to 26% when developers use AI assistants. But here is the catch. While overall productivity goes up, employment for U.S. developers aged 22 to 25 has plummeted by nearly 20% since 2024.
If AI makes coders 26% more productive, why are companies just firing the juniors? Aren't they burning the bridge that creates tomorrow's senior developers?
They absolutely are. It is automating the boilerplate. When a junior developer used to get hired, their first 2 years were spent doing the grunt work, writing repetitive code, doing basic QA testing, debugging simple errors.
Use an apprenticeship.
Exactly. It was an apprenticeship. But today, an AI can write that boilerplate code in seconds. So companies are looking at their ledgers and saying, well, why pay an entry-level salary when our senior developers can just use an AI to do the grunt work?
I mean, I understand the short-term margin boost, but I cannot wrap my head around the long-term strategy there. If you fire all the juniors today, how do you magically get a senior software architect in 10 years?
That is the systemic risk that most businesses are currently totally blind to. AI currently lacks the judgment, the historical context, and the strategic foresight that senior roles require. By substituting entry-level human labor with a chatbot, industries are just hollowing out their future pipeline of expertise.
And it isn't just human resources being hollowed out, it's natural resources too.
Oh, yes.
Let's pivot to the physical cost of running these models because the environmental toll is staggering. The Stanford Index notes that training a model like Grok 4 created an estimated 72,816 tons of CO2 emissions.
To contextualize that for you listening, that is equivalent to the annual emissions of tens of thousands of gas-powered cars, just to train one model one single time.
And in the power demand, AI data center power capacity has risen to around 29.6 gigawatts. The report equates that to the peak power demand of the entire state of New York.
It's massive.
And then you have the water usage. Just 1 year of GPT-4 inference, meaning just the daily querying by users, could require enough cooling water to exceed the drinking water needs of 1.2 million people.
The physical footprint is unbelievable. But there is a vital glimmer of efficiency in the report that proves bigger isn't always fundamentally better.
Wait, really? Because right now it feels like the entire industry strategy is just plugging more servers into the wall.
In general-purpose AI, that is mostly true. But in specialized scientific AI, we are seeing a totally different approach. The report highlights a genomics model called GPN-STAR. It only has 200 million parameters.
Let's pause there and clarify that for the listener. What exactly is a parameter in this context?
Think of parameters like the adjustable knobs and dials on a giant audio mixing board. The more knobs you have, the more nuanced and complex the output can be.
Okay, that makes sense.
The biggest models today have hundreds of billions, even trillions of these knobs. They require massive supercomputers to run. But GPN-STAR only has 200 million.
Which is tiny by today's standards.
Exactly. Yet, for its specific task in genomics, this tiny model outperformed a model nearly 200 times its size. We are starting to see that highly specialized, carefully governed models can be incredibly efficient, both computationally and environmentally.
So if we take a step back and look at the landscape we've just painted, we have massive environmental costs, we have real job displacement targeting the youth, and we have breakneck, almost reckless adoption speeds in corporate environments. It is no wonder at all that the public is getting incredibly anxious, which perfectly sets up the massive divide in public trust that the Stanford Index captured.
The perception gap is profound. When asked about the impact AI will have on how people do their jobs, 73% of AI experts expect it to be positive.
Right. But when you asked the general public,
Only 23% of the public expect a positive impact.
that is a 50-point gap between the people building the tools in Silicon Valley and the people forced to use them in the real world.
And that trust deficit fractures geographically, too.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia is highly optimistic. They report a lot of trust in their governments to regulate AI safely. But North America and Europe, they are highly skeptical.
Very skeptical.
The U.S. actually has the lowest trust in its own government to regulate AI out of all the surveyed countries. Only 31% of Americans trust their government to handle this. Globally, people actually trust the European Union's oversight more than the U.S. or China.
And when you look closely at the U.S. domestic numbers, the fragmentation becomes even more apparent. I want to look at the CHIP 50 survey from the report.
Okay.
They asked people across all 50 U.S. states about federal AI regulation. And to be perfectly clear to you listening, we are just looking at the raw data here. We are absolutely not taking any political sides on who is right or wrong regarding policy. We just want to impartially report on the content provided so you can see how fractured the landscape is.
Right. Just looking at the numbers.
Exactly. So nationally, 41% of Americans say federal regulation won't go far enough, while 27% say it will go too far. But over a third of the country is just not sure.
It's completely split.
Yeah,
And it gets highly specific by region, doesn't it?
it does. New York and Tennessee reported the highest levels of concern that regulation will go too far, sitting at 31%. On the flip side, Missouri and Washington state had the highest shares of people concerned that the government will not go far enough.
This raises an important question.
What's that?
If public trust is incredibly low, and if government regulation is this highly fragmented and uncertain, what do organizations actually do today? They cannot just sit around and wait for lawmakers to swoop in and hand them a perfect legal framework.
Because by the time a law is debated, drafted, and passed, the technology has evolved 3 generations.
Exactly. Which means organizations must govern themselves. They have to build internal structures to manage this chaos. And this leads us directly away from the Wild West of the Stanford report and into Mathias Vercauteren's blueprint for the age of AI governance.
Yeah, let's bring in the ISAC webinar material, because Vercauteren frames this in a way that actually makes practical business sense. What exactly is governance?
Well, he treats governance simply as asset management. He starts with a very grounding premise. Every organization exists to achieve specific objectives. He uses a fictional example, Blue Cross Healthcare.
Okay.
Their objective is to deliver exceptional patient care and improve community health. To achieve those objectives, they rely on strategic assets.
Like their hospital facilities, their human resources, their financial capital.
Exactly. And any asset that is strategic, consequential, and risky requires governance. You don't just leave your company's cash lying around in a pile, you have finance governance.
Right.
You don't just hire people without contracts, you have HR governance. Vercauteren argues that AI has officially become the 7th core enterprise capability. It sits right next to IT, finance, HR, supply chain, facilities, and data.
And to manage this 7th capability, he introduces this concept of the governance DNA. It's brilliant in its simplicity. It boils down to 3 things: rules, roles, and control.
Yeah.
Let's ground this in a specific everyday business scenario so we can actually see how it works. Let's roleplay this. Say a mid-sized retail company decides to launch a generative AI chatbot on their website to handle customer returns.
Okay, perfect example. If they launch that bot without governance, it's just a loose cannon. The bot might hallucinate a lifetime return policy and promise full refunds to every customer because it randomly trained on a marketing blog from 2015.
Right, a total disaster. So how does the governance DNA fix that?
First, you establish the rules. These are your principles and standards. A rule might be the AI must only pull information from the currently approved 2026 return policy document.
That makes sense.
Second, you assign roles. These are the actual humans responsible for the asset. You need an AI product owner who actually signs off on the bot's behavior before it goes live.
Okay, rules, roles, and the third is control.
Right. Finally, you implement control. These are the mechanisms to ensure the rules are followed. You might have a dashboard that monitors the bot's chats live and an audit council that reviews its performance every month.
So if AI is this high-powered, incredibly expensive sports car we've just bought for the company, governance isn't the brakes meant to stop it from moving. Governance is the steering wheel and the mirrors, so we can actually drive the car fast without crashing it into a brick wall.
That is the exact mentality businesses need to adopt. Governance enables speed through safety.
Right.
But Vercauteren adds a very critical caveat to this. Yeah, you can build the most beautiful AI governance framework in the world with the best steering wheel and the cleanest mirrors, but it will completely fail if it isn't built on top of something else first.
But which brings us to what Vercauteren calls the dependency chain. Why does AI desperately need data governance?
This is perhaps his starkest warning in the entire webinar. AI governance simply cannot function without mature data governance. Remember, AI models don't have inherent wisdom. They learn entirely from data. They make predictions based on data.
So if the data is bad,
As the webinar explicitly states, without governed data, AI inherits every silent dysfunction your data already has and amplifies it.
let's explain how that happens in our retail chatbot example. If the database feeding the AI is full of outdated return policies or biased customer profiles, the AI will confidently output outdated and biased answers.
Right. Vercauteren says that the features fed into the model must actually relate to what the AI is predicting, otherwise it is just noise dressed as signal.
Noise dressed as signal. I love that. It's a fantastic phrase.
It really is. If your organization doesn't know where its data came from, which is a concept called data lineage, essentially a nutritional label for your data. If you don't know who owns it, or if it is accurate, applying AI to that data is just automating your own internal chaos.
But from a practical standpoint, business leaders listening to this might be panicking, thinking they have to hire an entire new department to handle this. But Vercauteren gives a huge piece of advice here. Integrate, do not duplicate.
Yes, he points out that data governance and AI governance share the exact same architectural foundation. It's just different content. In data governance, your control mechanism might be a data quality dashboard. In AI governance, it is a model performance dashboard.
And the rules follow the same logic.
Right. In data, your rules might be based on GDPR, which is the European rulebook for personal privacy. In AI, they might be based on the EU AI Act, which categorizes AI by risk level, the structure, rules, roles, control.
So if a company already has a data steward managing their customer database, Vercauteren is saying we shouldn't invent a brand new redundant AI steward role to sit in a different office, right? We just extend the existing data steward's job to include checking the AI's data lineage and licensing.
Exactly. You do not need to build two parallel competing silos of bureaucracy. You use a single governance council. You extend existing roles. This is exactly how organizations can survive the age of AI governance without drowning in red tape. You leverage the foundation you already have.
Okay, let's take a breath and connect the dots on everything we've explored today. We started by looking at the wild, unfettered explosion of AI power detailed in the Stanford Index.
We saw the U.S. and China essentially tying for first place despite a 23 times investment gap.
Right, and we looked at the severe environmental tolls, the very real anxieties of the junior workforce being squeezed out of their apprenticeships, and a general public that is deeply distrustful of both the technology and the government's ability to regulate it.
It is a landscape defined by rapid, breathtaking capability, but profound uncertainty.
But then we found the antidote in Vercauteren's pragmatic approach. By treating AI as a core asset and integrating AI governance directly into existing data governance frameworks using rules, roles, and control, companies don't have to wait for lawmakers.
They can take action now.
Exactly. In this new age of AI governance, the organizations that govern their AI assets well are going to be the ones who deploy faster, with more confidence, and most importantly, they're the ones who will actually win back that missing public trust.
They will be the ones driving the sports car safely. But I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed today.
Oh, let's hear it.
Deep in the Stanford report, there is a fascinating observation. It notes that our current AI evaluations and human design benchmarks are actually being outpaced by the very AI progress they were built to measure. The models are getting too smart for the tests.
Wow.
So if our AI models are becoming more capable than the human frameworks we use to evaluate them, will our human-designed governance frameworks eventually become obsolete? Will we, in the near future, be forced to rely on AI to govern AI?
Wow. If the ground underneath our skyscraper is moving that fast, maybe we need the building itself to tell us how to balance it. That is a wild thought to leave off on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this helps you, the learner, navigate what's coming next with a bit more clarity and a lot more confidence. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Digi-Tech Debates on Project Plain Talk. Keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.